Hi, my name is Chris Thron. I teach math at Texas A&M University Central Texas, and today I want to talk to you about student mathematical modeling projects with interactive Excel spreadsheets. Let me give you an overview. There were two semester-long projects in a projects class. Kara Klinke is pre-high school certifying. Danny Salinas is pre-actuarial. They both earned 3 credits for this project. The motivation for the project in both cases was to address a meaningful, practical problem related to the student's chosen profession. Also, to demonstrate that math modeling can enhance practical policy decisions and to come up with a useful product that others could use. And you'll see how that was implemented in both cases. So, why use Excel? First of all, it makes use of prior programming knowledge. In Kara's case, that included Visual Basic. Excel is universal on-the-job software. What they learned about Excel in this project class will also be useful to them on the job. In almost any job at the work computer, you'll have Excel on the computer. Excel already has the interface, no need to program it. You have the input cells, you have graphical capabilities. On the minus side, Excel is not as portable as Java, but on the whole, we felt that Excel would be better for these projects. We didn't want to spend so much time on the programming side. All right, here's Kara's project. This is her poster that she presented at a couple of research conferences. And the motivation for Kara's project was the following question, a set of questions. Do teachers waste time grading far more than necessary? Do teachers grade enough homework, tests, etc. to give an accurate grade? And how do grading innovations such as dropping the lowest grade or minimum grade policies affect grade distributions? Now, this was a politically important issue in Texas because in 2010, the court prohibited schools from implementing mandatory minimum grading policies because they felt that it did not give an accurate grade. So we wanted to address these questions in a quantitative way. So what Kara's project did was create a practical tool for evaluating grading schemes. A user-friendly spreadsheet that uses teacher inputs, reassignment, and student performance, and you'll see that in a few minutes. The spreadsheet uses Monte Carlo, that is repeated random trials, to simulate student performance, and the Monte Carlo was programmed in Visual Basic. And the spreadsheet outputs the mean and standard deviations for different student profiles. Okay, here's the actual spreadsheet to show you how it works. There are several sections in the spreadsheet. This first section is the individual assignment information. Here is where the teacher will put in their grading scheme. Here on the left you see there are several types of assignments, homework, quiz, etc. I can add my own. I'm going to add test here. I could add things like final, project, etc. That's fine as long as I use consistent categories in all of these spreadsheet sections. Here are the topics covered. There's actually 4 topics covered in this class. I've covered the first 2 in the first quiz. I'm going to cover the next 2 in the second quiz, and I'm going to cover all 4 in the test. Total point value for each assignment, well, maximum grade is 100 on the quiz, 100 on the test. Completion points, notice that the homework is actually completion grade. The quiz, I'm not going to assign any completion points for the quiz or the test. The number of graded items, there are 10 graded questions on the quiz, 20 graded questions on the test. And if my quiz questions had multiple parts, then I would include all the parts in this number of graded items. The number of partial credit levels per item, well, this is a ballpark figure. I'm saying that roughly my students can get some partial credit, and I grade at a granularity of 33%. So the student may get 33%, 66%, or 100%. So again, this is kind of a ballpark figure. I'm going to put 3 here. This is to avoid the student getting either all right or all wrong. The number of lowest items dropped, well, I'm going to drop the lowest question on the quiz and drop the lowest 2 on the test. The minimum score, I'm not going to have any minimum score. Okay, so we go to summary grade information. So what percentages do homework, quiz, and test count in the final grade? So I'm going to make homework be 25%, quiz be 35%, and test be 40%. And here are my minimum scores for A, B, C, and D. Okay. So I've done with my grading information. Now I'm going to input my student profile. So you see student number 1, his actual proficiency on topic 1 is 70%. So this is a level of measure of his competency. Of course, this I can't know. This is where I see how the grades that I assign reflect the student's actual competency. So these are students' actual competency to test out the grading scheme. So student number 4, I'm going to say they start off very well, but then for one reason or another, they don't do well on the last 2 topics. They don't master those. Okay, so now I have the student rate of participation in the assignments. So let's see, for the homework assignments, the student only turns in about 50% of their homework. In this case, I don't have minimum grades, so that one doesn't apply. Anxiety factor, that's mostly for tests, so I'm going to put a 0 there. All right, now quiz, also a percent not turned in. He does attend all the quizzes, none for 0 grade, and let's not include test anxiety. All right, so now we're ready for the results, which will appear here. I'm going to go ahead and run the macro, which I do by going up to View, going up to Macros, go to View Macros, and simply run. Now what the program just did was it ran about 1,000, I believe, simulated semesters, and tallied the grades for each semester, and computed means and standard deviations. So here are the student grading results. So you'll notice that although the student number 4 really had subpar knowledge on topics 3 or 4, he still passed the class with on average, but with a fairly large standard deviation. In fact, the student has a 4% chance of getting an A, and a 25% chance of getting a B. There's some other interesting things here. Notice that student 3, his competency was 75 on each one of the topics. However, his expected grade is 84. So how is that possible? Well, remember, the homework was for completion grade. And you can see how that tends to rise the grading average. So he has a 90% chance of getting a B, even though his actual competency would more accurately reflect in a C. Now there are a bunch of things I can do with this spreadsheet. If I wanted to do more student profiles, I can simply fill over, and here's student 5, and student number 6. And then I can put in different profiles here. I don't know, 60, 70, 40, 20, and so on. And I can rerun the spreadsheet. And here let's do him as 70, 30, 20, 80. Okay. And then we'll make these zeros here. And I can simply rerun the spreadsheet and get their results. So you can see the sheet is quite easy to use. So here are the results of some preliminary studies that Kara did. This first was to gauge the effect of amount of homework graded on accuracy of grades. So with this particular grading scheme, Kara studied 3 different possibilities: either grade all the homework assigned, half the homework assigned, or 17% of the homework assigned. And here was the percentage of crossover grades, which was a reflection of inaccuracy of the grading scheme. So you notice that the grading half of the homework had a minimal effect on the accuracy of the grade assigned. So the teacher could save that much work without sacrificing grade accuracy. The study on the right shows the effect of minimum grading policy on passing rates. Identical student profiles. This one is 95, 75, 25 for 3 different topics. Notice that with minimum grading policy, the student passed more than 40% of the time. Without minimum grading policy, the student almost never passed. So you can see that the grading policy had a huge effect on the percentage of students that passed the class. This says nothing about whether the students were encouraged or not. Students with the same performance levels would pass with minimum grading and would not pass without minimum grading. Okay, that's it for Kara's presentation. If you'd like to see Danny's, then you can watch the other video. Thanks for watching.